All right, so this is number 1 on your composite functions packet. I had a request to do this. So your first function is f of x equals the square root of 9 minus x squared, and then g of x is equal to the square root of x squared minus 1. The first thing you're supposed to find is find function f plus function g. So what you would do is you take function f, which is the square root of 9 minus x squared, and you'd add function g, which is the square root of x squared minus 1. So that's the first part of your answer. It's probably the easiest part to do. We can't simplify this anymore. This is all we can do. So then what we do after that is the main part of this was to find the domain. So we have to think about the domain of f and the domain of g, and then we're going to combine them, because that's all we did here was we combined through addition. So here, if I want to find my domain of this, well, the first thing I know is I have a radical. And with domains, we look for two things. We either look for, we don't want to divide by 0, which here we're not dividing, so we're okay. The other thing is we never want a negative number under our radical because it results in imaginary numbers. So to begin with this one, what we're going to first do is say, okay, I don't want any of this to be negative. So that means I want 9 minus x squared to be greater than or equal to 0, because 0 on up is going to give you a positive number. And then this part for g, the function domain of function g, again, since it's a radical, I don't want any of that to be negative either. So I can do x squared minus 1 is greater than or equal to 0, because that would be all the positive numbers. Then we actually go about solving this. So if I solve this, I'm going to just go ahead and move this x squared over to the other side by adding x squared. So I get 9 is greater than or equal to x squared. And then to get rid of that squared, I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Well, remember, when you take the square root of something squared, you get the positive version. So x is less than or equal to 3. But then you also have to think of the negative numbers. So I know I could plug in -3, I could plug in -4, -5. But if I want it to be less than 9, if I plug in -4 squared 16, and 16 is not less than 9, so that means I want it to be greater than or equal to -3. Because if I plug in -2 squared is 4, and that would work, and stuff like that. So you get that. So it flips when you do your negative case. Then here, to solve this one, I'm going to add over 1. So then I get x squared is greater than or equal to 1. And again, I'm going to take the square root of both sides. When I do that, I get the positive case, so x is greater than or equal to 1. Then I get the negative case, but you have to think, would x be bigger than -1 or less than -1? So if I plug in 0 here, 0 squared is 0, and 0 is not bigger than 1. So it can't be bigger than -1, so let's try something smaller than -1. So -2. -2 squared is 4, and that's going to be greater than 1, so I want it to be x is less than or equal to -1. So again, that sign just flipped when we're dealing with a negative case. Now, this is my domain for g of x. This is my domain of f of x. But since I'm doing both of them, I need to combine both their domains. So the easiest way to think about this is if you draw this out. So here's my number line. I have to have something that works in both of these equations. So here I know x has to be less than 3 and greater than -3. So if I were to actually draw this out, 3, -3, that means my domain of f of x is here in purple. Then to do the domain of g of x I'll do in orange. So g of x is greater than or equal to 1. So if I go to 1, it's going to be a closed dot, but everything greater than is going to go this way. And everything less than -1, well, -1's about right here, so it would go this way. So I can only have values that hold on and make both work. Well, that's going to be where these two functions overlap. So it overlaps here, and it overlaps here. So my domain is going to be from -3 to -1, and it's going to include both of those. So I'll use the square brackets, and then union 1 to 3. And that's how you would do those ones. So this domain of f plus g is this, what we see here. It's just a combination of both domains. It has to make both of them work, so that's where these overlap. So that's all you do for number 1. Then you would do the subtraction and the multiplication and the division, which are all pretty much exactly the same. All right, thanks.